Listen carefully, because this love is not an accident, not a coincidence, and not a mistake. There are people who enter your life because you chose them, and there are people who enter your life because God sent them. This love you are experiencing, God allowed it. Before you met them, He saw them. Before your hearts connected, He aligned the timing. You thought it was chance, but heaven calls it purpose. There are moments when God answers prayers, not with money, not with doors, not with miracles, but with a person. Because sometimes the greatest healing doesn't come through events, it comes through relationship. God knew your silent battles. He knew the nights you cried without telling anyone. He knew the weight you carried behind your smile. And so He sent someone, not perfect but positioned. This love came to remind you that you are still chosen, that you are still worthy of care, that your heart was never meant to live in survival mode forever. Some people think love is only about romance, but divine love is about restoration. This person arrived not just to love you, but to awaken you. You started praying again. You started believing again. You started seeing yourself differently again. That is not emotional coincidence. That is spiritual alignment. God uses love to heal areas prayer alone couldn't reach. He uses connection to rebuild confidence trauma destroyed. He uses affection to restore hope disappointment tried to kill. This love didn't come to distract you from your destiny. It came to support it. When God sends love, it doesn't drain you, it strengthens you. It doesn't confuse you, it grounds you. It doesn't pull you away from purpose, it pushes you toward it. But hear this clearly, every God-sent love comes with a test, not to break you, but to grow you. Because love is not only about joy, it is about maturity. It teaches patience, it teaches humility, it teaches forgiveness. And sometimes God brings love into your life, not to stay forever, but to prepare you for what's next. Yes, some people are seasonal blessings. They come to heal you, teach you, and then release you. And if God removes someone, do not cry as if you lost love. Rejoice that the assignment was completed, because God never wastes love. He uses it. If this love stays, God is building a future. If it leaves, God has already built something inside you. Either way, you win. So stop questioning why God allowed this love. Stop fearing the outcome. Stop doubting the process. This love came because you were ready, even if you didn't know it. It came because your heart had healed enough to receive. It came because heaven trusted you with it. And if you protect this love with faith, prayer, and wisdom, it will not destroy you. It will elevate you. Because when God brings love into your life, He is not playing games. He is fulfilling purpose. There are wounds inside you that never bled on the outside. No one saw them, no one asked about them, and you became so good at carrying them that even you forgot how heavy they were. You smiled at work, you laughed with friends, you showed up for responsibilities, but deep inside there were fractures formed by rejection, disappointment, betrayal, neglect, and unanswered prayers. These wounds were not loud, they were silent. They lived in the way you stopped trusting easily, the way you overthought small things, the way your heart stayed guarded, even when your lips said, "I'm fine." God saw those wounds long before anyone else did, and He knew that words alone would not heal them. That is why He allowed this love to enter your life. Some wounds are created in childhood, when you learn too early how to be strong. Maybe you learned not to cry because no one came when you did. Maybe you learned to solve your own problems because help never arrived. You grew up independent, admired by people, but independence was born from abandonment. Then one day, this person came into your life and did something unusual. They stayed, they listened. They didn't rush you when you were quiet. They didn't disappear when you were emotional. And slowly, without sermons or advice, something inside you softened. That is not coincidence. That is healing in motion. Think about how this love made you feel safe enough to be tired. In daily life, you were always the strong one, the reliable one, the one who handled everything. But with this person, you could finally say, "I'm exhausted," without feeling weak. You could rest without guilt, You could admit fear without being judged. That is how God heals the wound of always having to be strong. He sends someone who says, through their presence, you don't have to perform here. There are wounds from past relationships where love came with conditions. Love that disappeared when you made mistakes. Love that punished honesty. Love that made you feel you had to earn affection. Those wounds taught you to walk on eggshells. Then this love showed up and didn't leave when you were imperfect. You spoke your truth and they didn't walk away. You had a bad day and they didn't withdraw. Slowly, your nervous system learned a new language. Love does not always leave. That is God rewiring your heart. Some wounds come from being misunderstood. You tried to explain yourself in the past, but your words were twisted, ignored, or minimized. Over time, you stopped explaining. You learned silence. And then this person arrived and somehow understood you even when you didn't finish your sentences. They noticed changes in your tone. They sensed when something was wrong, even when you said nothing. That heals the wound of invisibility. That reminds your soul, I am seen. There are wounds created by failure, moments when life didn't turn out the way you prayed for, dreams that collapsed, plans that fell apart. You carried quiet shame, wondering if you were the problem. This love entered your life and didn't see you as broken or behind. They saw your potential, your effort, your resilience. They spoke belief into places where self-doubt lived. Every time they encouraged you, every time they stood by you when things were uncertain, God was healing the wound of self-blame. Daily life gives us wounds through comparison. You saw others moving ahead, getting married, succeeding, celebrating milestones while you felt stuck. You smiled for them, but inside you wondered if you were late in life. Then this love came and didn't rush you. They didn't make you feel behind. With them, you felt present instead of pressured. That heals the wound of feeling late, the wound of constantly racing against time. Some wounds come from never feeling chosen. You were the option, not the priority, the backup, not the first call. You accepted less because you were used to less. Then this love chose you intentionally. They made time. They showed up consistently. They made effort without being asked. That consistency healed the wound that whispered, I'm not enough to stay for. There are wounds that come from loneliness even when surrounded by people. You were in rooms full of voices but still felt alone. This love brought companionship that didn't require constant talking. Just being together felt full. That heals the wound of emotional isolation, reminding you that connection is not about noise, but presence. Every time this love showed patience when you expected anger, understanding when you expected judgment, and commitment when you expected distance. A wound you never spoke about began to close. God did not send this love to impress you. He sent it to restore you. He knew your heart was tired of surviving. He knew it was time for you to experience healing, not through explanations, but through experience, not through lessons, but through love, not through promises, but through consistency. There comes a moment in life when the damage is not visible on the face, but deeply rooted in belief. You didn't stop loving because you wanted to. You stopped believing because life taught you to doubt. Every disappointment, every broken promise, every time you gave your best and still lost. Something inside you quietly said, maybe I'm not enough. And slowly, without realizing it, you stopped trusting love. Not because love was wrong, but because pain was convincing. God saw that erosion happening inside you. He saw how confidence was slipping, how hope was shrinking, how you began to settle for less, not in words, but in expectations. That is why this love entered your life, to rebuild what life slowly tore down. There was a time when you walked into rooms with certainty. You spoke freely. You dreamed boldly. But after repeated letdowns, you began to question yourself in everyday moments. You would hesitate before speaking, replay conversations in your head, wonder if you said too much or felt too deeply. In simple daily interactions, at work, with friends, even with family, you started shrinking yourself to avoid rejection. Then this love came and did something powerful. It didn't make you smaller, it made you expand again. You spoke your thoughts and weren't corrected. You shared ideas and weren't dismissed. Little by little your voice returned. That is not emotional comfort, that is restoration. You had learned to measure your worth by outcomes. If things worked, you felt valuable. If they failed, you blamed yourself. In daily life, one bad day could make you doubt your entire journey. A rejection email, a missed opportunity, a delayed dream, each one felt like proof that you were falling behind. Then this love showed you something different. On days when you achieved nothing, you were still valued. On days when you were quiet, you were still wanted. On days when you felt lost, you were still chosen. That consistency taught your heart a new truth. Your worth is not situational. Somewhere along the way, love became associated with fear. You started expecting endings even in beginnings. You would enjoy moments but secretly brace for loss. You kept one foot out of the door, not because you didn't care, but because you cared too much. This love came into your life and stayed. Not loudly, not dramatically, just steadily, day after day, message after message, presence after presence, in the ordinary routines, morning greetings, checking in after work, remembering small details. Your nervous system learned a new rhythm. Love does not always disappear. Love can remain. You also lost belief in yourself because you kept loving harder when others loved less. You gave understanding where there was indifference. You forgave where there was repetition. Over time, you began to wonder if loving deeply was a weakness. Then this love met you at your level. You gave effort and received effort. You showed care and received care. For the first time, love felt balanced. That balance healed the belief that something was wrong with the way you love. Daily life had trained you to lower expectations. You would tell yourself, don't hope too much, don't get attached, don't believe words. You called it being realistic, but it was actually self-protection. Then this love didn't overpromise. It underlined words with actions. When they said they would call, they did. When they said they would show up, they showed up. Slowly, your heart began to trust not just them, but your own judgment again. You realized, I can choose well. I am not foolish for believing. There were moments when you doubted your attractiveness, not just physically, but emotionally. You wondered if you were too much, too sensitive, too intense. In daily life, you would apologize for your feelings before even expressing them. This love didn't make you apologize for being human. Your emotions were welcomed, not tolerated. That restored your belief that you are not a burden, you are a presence. You also began to believe again in future possibilities. Before this love, the future felt like something to survive, not something to look forward to. You planned cautiously, expecting delays and disappointments. Then suddenly, you found yourself imagining tomorrow with hope again. Simple things like shared plans, conversations about growth, and mutual encouragement made the future feel lighter. That is God lifting the fog from your vision, ever. Each time this love reflected back your value. Every time it honored your effort. Every time it met you with sincerity. Instead of games, a broken belief inside you was repaired. God didn't just send someone to love you, He sent someone to remind you who you were before life convinced you otherwise. There was a time when your emotions felt like a storm with no forecast. One day you felt hopeful, the next day drained. One conversation could lift you, another could ruin your peace. You didn't realize it then, but your heart was living in reaction mode, constantly responding to uncertainty. Love had taught you to stay alert, not at rest. God saw that instability forming inside you, and He knew your soul could not thrive in chaos. That is why this love entered your life, not to excite your emotions, but to steady them. Before this love, your days were filled with emotional guessing. You woke up wondering how someone would treat you today. You checked your phone with anxiety instead of joy. Silence made you overthink. Delays made you panic. In daily life, your mood depended on someone else's behavior. Then this love came and removed the guessing. Communication became clear. Intentions became consistent. You no longer had to decode messages or read between lines. Peace replaced confusion, and that peace became your new normal. Emotional chaos often disguises itself as passion. High highs and low lows can feel intense, but intensity is not stability. You once believed that love had to be dramatic to be real. Arguments followed by apologies, closeness followed by distance, affection followed by coldness. Your heart was constantly on edge. This love arrived differently. It didn't spike your emotions, it settled them. You weren't addicted to emotional adrenaline anymore. You could breathe. That calm wasn't boring, it was healing. In everyday moments, you noticed the difference. Wow. End problems arose. There were conversations instead of explosions. When misunderstandings happened, there was patience instead of punishment. You didn't feel the need to defend yourself constantly. You didn't rehearse explanations in your head before speaking. Your emotional energy was no longer spent on survival, but on growth. That is what stability looks like in real life. There were times when you carried stress from work, family, or responsibilities, and instead of adding pressure, this love became a safe place. You could talk without being fixed. You could vent without being judged. You could sit in silence without awkwardness. In a world that constantly demands strength, this love allowed you to soften. Emotional stability is not about never feeling pain. It's about knowing you won't face it alone. Before this love, disagreements felt like threats. You feared that conflict meant ending, so you swallowed your feelings or exploded when they piled up. This love taught you that disagreement does not equal abandonment. You could express discomfort without losing connection. That healed the fear that honesty destroys love. In daily life, this meant healthier communication, better boundaries, and deeper trust. Emotional chaos drains your focus. It makes you question yourself constantly. It steals energy from your goals. You might have noticed how, before this love, your productivity dropped whenever emotional turbulence increased. Your sleep suffered. Your peace suffered. With stability came clarity. You could focus again. You could plan again. You could dream again. Love stopped being a distraction and became a foundation. This love didn't push you to prove yourself. You didn't have to compete for attention or affection. You were not constantly trying to earn reassurance. Instead, reassurance was woven into consistency. That quiet assurance healed the insecurity that once ruled your emotions. Stability is not loud reassurance, it's reliable presence. In daily life, you also became more emotionally mature. You reacted less and responded more. You paused instead of panicking. You learned that not every mood needs immediate action. This love mirrored emotional regulation back to you. You grew because peace allows growth. Chaos only demands coping. God brings emotional stability because He knows your destiny requires clarity. A restless heart cannot hear divine direction. This love aligned your emotions so your spirit could lead. You began to trust your feelings again because they were no longer hijacked by fear. Love became a place of rest, not confusion, a source of strength, not exhaustion, a rhythm that allowed your heart to finally feel safe enough to stay present. There was a season when your spirit felt quiet, not because God had left, but because life had grown loud. Responsibilities, disappointments, routines, and survival had slowly taken the place of reflection and prayer. You still believed, but you no longer felt connected. Faith became something you carried in memory instead of something you lived daily. God saw that distance forming, and He knew that lectures would not draw you back, fear would not awaken you, and pressure would not transform you. So He used love as alignment. This love did not arrive preaching, it arrived practicing. In simple daily moments, it reminded you of what still mattered. You noticed how being around this person made you calmer, more thoughtful, more aware of your inner state. You became less reactive, more reflective. You started asking yourself deeper questions, not out of anxiety, but out of awareness. That is how spiritual growth begins, not with noise, but with stillness. Before this love, your days moved fast. You woke up tired, rushed through tasks, scrolled to escape, slept with Peace. There was no space to listen inward. With this love, you began to slow down. Conversations were not rushed. Silence felt meaningful. You started appreciating small moments, walks, shared meals, quiet evenings. In those ordinary routines, your spirit found room to breathe again. Growth happens when the soul is no longer suffocated by constant urgency. You also noticed how your choices began to change. You became more mindful of what drained you and what nourished you. You started protecting your energy. You became selective with your time. This love didn't pull you into chaos or compromise. It invited you into balance. Spiritual growth often looks like choosing peace over drama, depth over distraction, purpose over impulse. There were moments when this love challenged you gently, not through control, but through example. You saw patience instead of reaction, integrity instead of excuses, compassion instead of judgment. Without realizing it, you began mirroring those qualities. Growth does not always come through correction. Sometimes it comes through exposure. You grow into what you consistently witness. In daily life, you began responding differently to stress. Instead of immediately panicking, you paused. Instead of complaining, you reflected. Instead of blaming, you learned. That pause was not weakness, it was spiritual maturity forming. This love created a space where your inner voice could finally be heard again. And in that space, wisdom began to rise. You may have also noticed a renewed desire for prayer, reflection, or purpose. Not forced, not fearful, just natural. You wanted alignment, not achievement, meaning not applause. This love didn't replace God. It redirected you back to Him by calming the noise that once blocked His voice. There were old habits that quietly lost their grip. Patterns that once controlled you started fading. Not because who fought them, but because you outgrew them. You became less interested in proving yourself and more interested in becoming yourself. That shift is spiritual growth. You move from performance to presence. In relationships, you began to value honesty over image, depth over surface. You stopped pretending to be okay and started being real. That authenticity aligned you with truth. And truth is always the foundation of spiritual maturity. You learned that being genuine is more powerful than being impressive. This love also taught you humility. You learned how to listen, how to compromise, how to see beyond your own perspective. Spiritual growth is not isolation, it is expansion. You grew by learning to love without losing yourself, to connect without compromising your values, to care without controlling. You also became more aware of gratitude. You stopped rushing past blessings. You noticed provision in small forms, timely support, encouraging words, peaceful moments. Gratitude grounded you in the present, and the present is where spiritual awareness lives. God aligned you with spiritual growth by placing love in your life that did not distract your soul but awakened it. This love didn't make you louder, it made you deeper. It didn't make you rush, it made you rooted. It didn't pull you away from purpose, it positioned you closer to it. There was a time when your reactions spoke faster than your wisdom. Not because you were careless, but because life had trained you to defend instead of discern. You learned to respond quickly, to protect your heart immediately, to assume the worst before it could surprise you. God saw that instinct growing inside you, and He knew that the next level of your life would not be sustained by impulse, but by maturity. So He allowed this love to enter your life as a classroom, not a comfort zone. Maturity begins when you realize that everything deserves a reaction. In daily life, you used to feel the urge to explain yourself to everyone, to correct every misunderstanding, to win every argument. This love taught you something powerful through simple moments. Sometimes silence was chosen over argument. Sometimes understanding was offered instead of defense. You watched how calm responses changed outcomes. You learned that maturity is not about proving strength, but about choosing peace even when ego demands noise. Patience was not something you lacked by nature. It was something pain had exhausted. You had waited before and been disappointed. You had trusted timing and been let down. So impatience became a shield. In everyday situations, delays frustrated you. Unanswered messages unsettled you. Uncertainty made you restless. This love did not rush you or pressure you. It moved steadily. Waiting no longer felt threatening. You began to see that patience is not weakness, it is confidence in process. You learned patience in ordinary routines. When plans changed and there was no anger. When progress was slow and there was no blame. When growth took time and there was no pressure. You realized that real love is not urgent, it is intentional. That lesson extended beyond relationships and into life. You stopped forcing outcomes. You stopped chasing validation. You allowed things to unfold. Grace entered your life in the form of understanding. Before this love, mistakes often came with consequences, reminders, and emotional punishment. You learned to fear imperfection. This love responded differently. Errors were met with conversation. Flaws were met with compassion. You were corrected without being condemned. That experience rewired something inside you. You learned to offer the same grace to yourself. In daily life, grace showed up when you missed a deadline and didn't spiral into self-criticism. And you had a bad day and didn't define yourself by it. When someone disappointed you and you chose understanding over resentment. Grace softened your inner dialogue. You stopped being your harshest judge. Maturity also taught you boundaries. You learned that love does not require self-abandonment. You could say no without guilt. You could take space without fear. You could express needs without apology. In daily interactions, you noticed how emotional honesty prevented silent resentment. That balance is maturity, knowing where you end and others begin. Patience showed up in your conversations. You listened more than you spoke. You sought clarity instead of assumptions. You learned that understanding takes time, and rushing conclusions often damages truth. That patience improved not only love, but friendships, work relationships, and family dynamics. Grace taught you forgiveness without denial. You stopped pretending things didn't hurt, but you also stopped allowing hurt to harden you. Forgiveness became a release, not a reward for others. In daily life, this meant sleeping better, carrying less emotional weight, and reclaiming peace. This love taught you that growth is gradual. You didn't change overnight, and you didn't need to. Progress became enough. Effort became visible. You stopped comparing your journey to others. Maturity allowed you to honor your pace. In moments of conflict, you learned to pause, to breathe, to respond rather than react. That pause changed everything. It protected relationships. It preserved dignity. It strengthened trust. You realized that emotional control is power. Grace extended outward as well. You became less judgmental, more understanding of people's struggles. You stopped assuming intentions and started observing patterns. Compassion replaced criticism. That shift expanded your capacity to lead, to connect, to influence. God takes maturity, patience, and grace, not to limit you, but to prepare you. This love didn't spoil you, it shaped you. It didn't indulge your weaknesses. It strengthened your character. It trained your heart to handle more responsibility, more purpose, more blessing, more love. There are seasons in life that feel ordinary on the surface, but are secretly preparing you for elevation. You don't always feel the shift when it begins. You just notice that old habits stop satisfying you, familiar environments start feeling tight, and certain conversations no longer match who you are becoming. God does not announce every transition. Sometimes He introduces it through a relationship. This love entered your life not as a distraction, but as preparation. Before this season, you were surviving more than you were building. You handled responsibilities, met expectations, and carried weight quietly. You were strong, but strength alone cannot carry you into a higher season. Capacity must grow. This love began expanding your emotional, mental, and spiritual capacity. You found yourself thinking differently, responding differently, choosing differently. That is preparation happening from the inside out. In daily life, preparation looks subtle. You became more disciplined with your time. You stopped over-explaining yourself. You learned when to speak and when to remain silent. Situations that once pulled emotional reactions out of you no longer had the same power. You didn't become colder, you became clearer. Higher seasons require clarity because confusion drains momentum. This love also exposed areas where you needed growth, not through criticism, but through awareness. You saw patterns you could no longer ignore. You recognized emotional triggers that had been holding you back. Instead of reacting, you reflected. Instead of blaming, you adjusted. Preparation is not about perfection. It's about alignment. You may have noticed that your tolerance for chaos decreased. Environments that thrived on drama, negativity, or stagnation started exhausting you. This love didn't pull you into that chaos, it pulled you out of it. You began craving peace, structure, and purpose. That craving is not weakness, it's readiness for more. In everyday moments, preparation looked like choosing rest over burnout, choosing quality over quantity, choosing growth over comfort. You stopped filling your schedule with noise and started making room for intention. Higher seasons demand energy, and you began protecting yours. This love also taught you how to carry responsibility without resentment. You learned how to show up consistently, not emotionally. Commitment became a value, not a burden. That mindset spilled into your work, your goals, and your vision for the future. You began seeing yourself as capable of sustaining what you once only desired. You started setting higher standards, not just for others, but for yourself. You became aware of how you speak, how you act, how you respond under pressure. In daily life, this showed up in professionalism, emotional intelligence, and self-respect. You stopped settling for what was easy and started preparing for what was meaningful. Preparation also required pruning. Certain habits, distractions, and even relationships lost their place, not because they were bad, but because they no longer fit. This love didn't cling to your past, it supported your growth. You learned that outgrowing things is not betrayal, it's progression. Your vision expanded. You started thinking long-term instead of momentary. Decisions were no longer made based on temporary feelings, but lasting impact. That shift is necessary for a higher season. Elevation without wisdom leads to collapse. In moments of uncertainty, this love didn't panic with why. It remained steady. That steadiness trained you to trust process instead of rushing outcomes. You learned that preparation often feels like waiting, but waiting is active when it is intentional. God prepares you for higher seasons by strengthening your foundation. This love reinforced stability, accountability, and resilience. It reminded you that what you are becoming matters more than what you are escaping. You are not being delayed, you are being developed. You didn't just receive love, you received training. Training in consistency, training in patience, training in responsibility, training in vision. This love aligned you with the version of yourself that can handle greater purpose, deeper peace, and higher calling. There were moments when silence felt personal. You prayed, waited, hoped, and nothing seemed to move. Days passed, seasons changed, people progressed, and you wondered if heaven had misplaced your name. You didn't stop believing in God, but you quietly questioned whether He still remembered you. Life has a way of making faithful people feel invisible when answers delay. God saw that quiet doubt forming, not loud enough to confess, but heavy enough to wound, and He knew your heart needed reassurance stronger than words. You carried on with daily life, fulfilling duties, showing up for others, smiling when expected. From the outside, everything looked fine. Inside, you were asking questions you never spoke aloud. Why does it feel like everyone else is being answered? Why does my life feel paused, Even simple moments, scrolling through your phone, attending celebrations, hearing others share testimonies, triggered a quiet ache. Not jealousy, just confusion. That confusion was not ignored by God. Then this love appeared at a time when you were no longer asking for signs. It didn't come with fireworks or dramatic declarations. It came gently, almost unexpectedly. Someone noticed you, chose you, valued you without needing explanation. In a world where you felt overlooked, this attention felt intentional. That intention was heaven's fingerprint. God often reminds us we are not forgotten through human connection. When this love listened to you talk about ordinary things, when they remembered details you assumed no one cared about, when they showed consistency instead of curiosity, your soul received a quiet message: you matter. Those moments healed something deeper than loneliness. They addressed the fear of being unseen by God. In daily life, this reminder showed up in small ways. A message at the right time, encouragement on a difficult day, support when you didn't even ask. These moments weren't grand miracles, but they were timely. And timing is how God speaks when He wants to be gentle. There were days when you felt spiritually tired. You believed, but belief felt heavy. You prayed out of habit, not expectation. Then this love reignited hope without forcing faith. Their presence didn't pressure you to be strong or spiritual. It simply reminded you that you were still worth showing up for. And slowly, hope returned. You realized that God hadn't abandoned you in the waiting. He was working quietly, aligning moments, preparing people, softening hearts. This love wasn't late. It arrived exactly when your heart needed proof that delayed does not equal denial. In everyday struggles, this reminder became clearer. When you felt overwhelmed, someone stood with you. When you doubted yourself, someone believed in you. When you felt tired of carrying everything alone, someone shared the load. God was saying, through actions rather than words, I see you. You began noticing blessings you had overlooked before. Peace in moments that once caused anxiety. Strength where there was once exhaustion. Gratitude replacing bitterness. Being remembered by God doesn't always look like instant breakthroughs. Sometimes it looks like being sustained. You also noticed that this love didn't fill a void. It revealed your value. It didn't rescue you. It reminded you that you were never abandoned. That realization shifted how you viewed your past. Waiting was no longer punishment. It was protection. God often allows seasons of quiet, so we learn to recognize His voice when He whispers. This love was a whisper, not a shout. A reassurance, not a spectacle. A reminder that even in silence, you were never forgotten. In moments of reflection, you realized how many times God had spared you from things you once begged for. How many closed doors protected you. How many delays saved you. This love became evidence that God's timing is personal. You were never overlooked. You were being prepared. This love wasn't sent to complete you, but to confirm what heaven already knew. That your life still mattered, your prayers were still heard, your journey was still unfolding, your name was still known in places you could not see. There is a moment when everything you have heard, everything you have felt, and everything you have survived comes together into one clear truth. Your life was never random, and your pain was never wasted. Every delay, every tear, every unanswered prayer was shaping you, not sidelining you. What felt like silence was actually preparation. What felt like loss was actually protection. And what felt like waiting was God working where your eyes could not see. Remember this powerful truth. God never forgets a life He is preparing for purpose. If you are still breathing, still hoping, still dreaming, even quietly, it means heaven, it's not finished with you. The fact that you are still standing is proof that grace has been carrying you when strength could not. You did not survive because you were lucky. You survived because you were called. People may have walked away, seasons may have changed, plans may have collapsed, but destiny does not cancel itself because of difficulty. What is meant for you will always find you. Not when you are desperate, but when you are ready. Not when you demand it, but when it can sustain you. There is a famous truth that says delay is not denial. What feels late to you is often right on time in the hands of God. You were not ignored. You were being developed. You were not overlooked. You were being aligned. You were not forgotten. You were being fortified for more than you imagine. Never underestimate what God is doing in seasons that feel ordinary. Transformation rarely announces itself. It happens quietly, deeply, faithfully. Before elevation comes foundation. Before visibility comes maturity. Before breakthrough comes alignment. And hear this clearly, you are not behind in life. You are becoming, you are evolving. You are stepping into a version of yourself that required everything you went through. The pain refined you. The waiting strengthened you. The silence taught you to listen. The struggle trained you to endure. There is a reason you did not break when you could have. A reason you did not quit when it would have been easier. A reason you still believe, even after disappointment. That reason is purpose, and purpose always survives pressure. Let this truth settle in your spirit. What God starts, He completes. He does not abandon the work of His hands. He does not forget prayers prayed in tears. He does not overlook hearts that stayed soft in hard seasons. You are closer than you think. Closer to peace. Closer to clarity. Closer to fulfillment. What once confused you will soon make sense. What once hurt you will one day strengthen someone else through your story. Stand tall in this knowing your life is unfolding, not falling apart. The same God who carried you through the storm is now teaching you how to walk in the calm. And when the next season opens, you will realize you were never late, never forgotten, never alone.